In this video, I'm going to run through the top 5 most common questions that get asked in PGCE interviews, and I'm going to help you plan really great answers that will get you a teacher training place. So let's start with a question that comes up in every single teacher training interview, and that is, why do you want to become a teacher? And now, if you've not prepared for this question, your interview is not going to go well. This question is a really good question for screening people who are just not appropriate for the job. Some people want to go into teaching because they haven't got a job somewhere else and are not really committed to teaching. And those people generally do very badly. They drop out and generally fail. So this question helps the interviewer assess whether you are actually serious about being a teacher. And to be successful in this question, you want to get a few key things into your answer. So fundamentally, you're looking for 3 things: the subject, impact, and young people. These are the 3 things you want to focus your answer around: a love of your subject, the impact that you can have as a teacher, and that you're actually interested in helping young people and you're passionate about working with young people. Fundamentally, interviewers want to see a few things in this answer, and the more of these you can get in, the stronger your answer is going to be. So when you're planning your answer, try and get as many of these facts on this list that I'm going to give you into your answer. So fundamentally, they want subject experts. If you don't know your subject really well, you are never going to be effective as a teacher. They want people who are really knowledgeable and passionate about their subject. So talk about the love of your subject and your desire to get other people interested in that subject and further your subject within being a teacher. That is a great starting point. They want people that actually care about young people. So show some enthusiasm for working with young people and be really explicit and clear that you're applying to become a teacher because it gives you an opportunity to work with and help in the development of young people and future generations. You want to have an impact. So talk about the impact that you can have as a teacher. Perhaps reducing educational disadvantage could be one of the impacts that you can have. Inspiring young people to achieve more, improving the quality of education, improving the teaching of your subject nationally as a long-term goal. These are all basic impacts that teachers can have. The teaching profession has an immense impact on society, and you want to be part of that. If you think about your personal life and you can give examples of teachers that have had a large impact on you and link what they have done to your motivation for wanting to become a teacher, that can really strengthen your application. So for example, if you had an amazing chemistry teacher and you've now got a chemistry degree, that's probably not 2 separate things. The fact that you had brilliant chemistry teaching helped you get your chemistry degree, for example. If you had terrible chemistry teachers, you probably never would have been as successful as you've been. And you could link that to whatever your specialism is and the teachers that helped you on that road. Actually like children. This is something that teachers talk about quite a lot because there are some teachers out there who really, frankly, have a dislike of children and don't like working with young people, but they've kind of bumbled into the profession and are still here for reasons that we don't quite know. So you want to be quite clear about the fact that you enjoy working with young people. And if you've got any experience of this, make sure you mention that and talk about it with some passion. And most importantly, you have to be passionate about your subject. If that passion doesn't come across, you are not likely to be successful. Next, you have to show an active interest in education. So make sure that you're aware of recent news within education and the issues facing education. That's another thing that's quite important for this interview in general. And the other thing that you can do is make it clear that you enjoy the process of teaching, that you enjoy teaching other people things. And think about any experience within university, within tutoring, within youth organizations or clubs or anywhere, sports perhaps, where you have taught new skills to other people and talk really positively about how you enjoy that. Now that we've done this, we can look at the next question, which is, how do you deal with poor behavior? Now, as a teacher, this is something that you are going to have to deal with, and so it makes sense to ask this in an interview. And depending on your particular provider of teacher training, you may actually have to do a mock lesson in which the interviewers may be pretending to be children and they may behave really badly. So you may have to put some of this into practice. So to answer this question, you need to get a few fundamental ideas in there. So firstly, start by talking about relationships. That fundamentally, good behavior management is all about good, positive relationships. If you have good relationships with the students that you teach, that they like you, that they respect you as a teacher, your behavior in your class will be much, much better. You will have better behaved classes because you're liked and respected. If you have a falling out with a student, for example, the student has misbehaved in your lesson, you have consequenced them, they've ended up with a detention, it's very important that you repair that relationship and make sure they understand exactly where they went wrong and why you took the action that you did, and that every lesson is a new start. If you have a perception as an unfair, mean, or nasty teacher, and you don't have positive relationships, you will never be successful at behavior management. Next, mention consistency and challenge. The most effective teachers are consistent. They have consistent routines in their classroom, and that their expectations don't change day by day. That what they expect on Monday period 1 and what they expect on Friday period 5 is the same. That you know exactly where you stand with that teacher. They are phenomenally consistent. They don't let anything slip. And that brings me to challenge. So whenever there is poor behavior, it is very important that that is challenged, that there is a certainty of a sanction. For example, that whenever a student doesn't model the correct behaviors and is disrupting the learning of others, that goes challenged, never goes unchallenged. It always, always has to be challenged. So consistency and challenging all poor behavior is really important. That's just not something you are going to accept. You also need to be aware of the behavior policy, and in your interview, you have to mention the behavior policy. So all schools will have certain rules written down in a policy, and that is how teachers are expected to manage behavior. Different schools have different policies, and because you're going in as a PGCE student and not going in as the headmaster or the headmistress, you are going to have to follow the policy that has been laid down. So make sure you mention that and say that you're going to follow that consistently, correctly, and fairly. Lastly, and most importantly, use the phrase high expectations. Teachers that are effective have high expectations. They don't let things slide. They don't allow students to behave however they want. They create good, positive, quiet learning environments that are very well controlled. High expectations is absolutely essential. If you set your expectations low, students will lower them even further, and you will never be able to teach effectively. The best teachers have the highest expectations. So dealing with poor behavior is all about high expectations. We unfortunately see a lot of really, really bad answers to these questions. So people talk about having literally no idea. They go round in circles and don't give a strong answer to this. They show a lack of challenge. They don't necessarily say that they wouldn't challenge it, but you get the impression that actually they're not that bothered about poor behavior, and perhaps they even expect poor behavior. They may talk about schools having very poor behavior, and that is something that you're going to have to deal with. There's not the idea that you're not going to accept poor behavior and that you want your classroom to be a well-run, safe, productive learning environment where poor behavior isn't tolerated. And the absolute worst thing you can ever do in this question is give any hint that you have low expectations. Absolutely emphasize high expectations and you will be successful in this question. My other tip is make sure you look up a man called Bill Rogers, and you can find his stuff on YouTube, and he is really the go-to person for behavior management for new teachers. Really great techniques, very good research base. So look him up and watch his stuff. It will help a lot. So let's move on and look at the next question, which is why would you be a good teacher, or what makes a good teacher? Now, you could be asked both of these questions, or you could be asked either of these questions, but fundamentally, you're going to approach it in very similar ways, because the reasons that you would be a good teacher and what makes a good teacher in general are really the same thing. So I'm going to give you the characteristics that are associated with good teaching, and you can personalize this to your situation and use as many of these as possible. So let's start at this side. So the most important things for good teaching is what we call the gatekeeper skills. So behavior management is one absolutely key skill. If you don't have behavior management sorted, you will never be an effective teacher. If you were to walk into a classroom where 7 children are out of their seat for no reason, half the class are turned round, everybody's talking, there's paper aeroplanes flying around, that is a classroom where there is virtually no learning and progress happening. So without behavior management, you will never be effective as a teacher. Presence is another key thing. You may have noticed when you were at school that there was that teacher who, if they walked into a room, you got silence. That maybe the class was misbehaving, but when this member of staff walked in, that suddenly everything changed. That is presence. That teacher has an authority, and that really does help in being an effective teacher. They have that confidence and that presence. Having a weak presence will really cause you problems. The next thing is that great teachers are engaging. Students want to listen to them. They are interested in what they have to say, and they bring children in to what they are teaching. They've got that high level of engagement. That is really important. Another really big thing in education is reflection. Good teachers are reflective. If they've had a lesson that wasn't as good as they wanted, they think about that lesson deeply. They think, what could I change? Great teachers are extremely reflective. They're always thinking, what could they do better? They go and see someone else teach and they think, how do they teach differently to me? Is their ways better than mine? What can I learn from this? They're forever thinking about how they do their job and thinking, what could I change? I've been teaching like this for years, but maybe this isn't the best way to teach. Maybe there's a better way to deliver this. So reflective is really, really key to being an effective teacher. Also, subject expertise. You can definitely use that as something that would make you a good teacher if you have good subject knowledge. If you don't have good subject knowledge, perhaps that is a big problem that you need to sort out. So if you've got really great track record in your subject and really strong academic qualifications, that is something that can contribute to making you a great teacher. It's not enough if you have 4 PhDs but can't manage behavior, you're going to be a terrible teacher. But if you have amazing subject knowledge, that is going to make a big difference. Your passion for your subject is going to make a big difference. Good teachers are also patient. They're not easily flustered, and they see the long-term picture. And the other thing that massively contributes to teachers being really effective is what we call CPD. So continuing professional development. Good teachers are always improving. They're learning more and becoming better and better over time. So mention as many of these as you can in your interview. Link them to your past and your personality. Or if you're asked about what makes a great teacher, just talk through all of these and you'll have a great answer prepared. So let's move on and look at the next question, which is, what are the issues facing teachers right now? Unfortunately, there is quite a lot of issues facing the profession at the minute, and teaching training providers want to see that you're conscious of this, and they're really wanting to see that you have some awareness of what's actually facing teachers and what you're getting yourself in for, to be honest. And fundamentally, there's really 4 main things that I would say are facing the teaching profession. There is more than these, but these are 4 key ones that are easy to talk about in an interview. So firstly, there's workload, then there's behavior, recruitment, and funding. Workload in education is very high. You will work in the holidays. If you think you're going to leave at 3 o'clock and never work in holidays, that is not what's going to happen. You're going to have to work in holidays and you're going to have to work long hours to be effective. There's a lot of accountability. There will be lots of leadership in a school that is checking that you're marking enough and that you are teaching good quality lessons. And there will be lots of activities around this where there's people checking up on you quite a lot, and that can be quite high pressure. There's not enough PPA. PPA is the time that teachers are given off timetable to actually plan and prepare their lessons. And in some schools, that can be as low as 2 to 2.5 hours a week, which is very, very low. You could be expected to teach 22 hours and be only given 3 hours to plan that. That is not enough time to plan all those lessons. Some schools have ridiculous marking policies where you have to do so much marking that it is just completely unachievable. If you're given, say, 3 hours of time a week to do their marking, the policy may actually end up taking 6 hours to do. And so there you've used up all of your free time in the school and done half of your marking. Behavior can be a big issue. If you've got ineffective behavior policies, weak senior leadership that doesn't deal with behavior effectively, and managing challenging behavior is exhausting. Recruitment currently is a massive problem in schools. There is, in certain subjects, nowhere near enough people. So some jobs have virtually no applicants in certain subjects. Some teachers don't even put out adverts for teacher of physics anymore. They say teacher of science and just wait and hope someone in physics applies. Sometimes, occasionally, maths teacher jobs get 0 applicants, or the only applicant is someone who's been barred from the teaching profession and they've had their ban expire recently. You can have those situations. Recruitment in certain areas and certain schools is a massive issue. And fundamentally, there's just not enough funding in education at the minute. There's been cuts, there's resource shortages, there are situations in a lot of schools where schools can't really afford books for the students to write in, and so may ask that students use their books from last year and that they don't get a new science book, for example, until they've actually finished the one from last year. So these are some big issues that are facing schools. So in your interview, talk about workload, talk about behavior, talk about recruitment, and talk about funding. Particularly if you're applying for a shortage subject, talking about recruitment makes sense. Let's move on and look at question 5, which is what experience do you have working with young people? They may ask about working in schools, they may ask about working in education. But fundamentally, you need to have something to talk about. And I've put it in a pyramid, where at the bottom is the weakest examples, but better than nothing. And at the top is the best example. So think about if you've ran any clubs, been involved in any clubs, sports, for example, cadets, volunteering in something that involves young people, or tutoring is also teaching experience. That is the basics. If you've got any of those experiences, talk about them. Then school visits. You should really be visiting schools before you get serious in applying for PGCE places. So you really want to get some school experience. The strongest experience that only a minority of people, perhaps teaching assistants that are moving into teaching, will have is actually having worked in a school. That's the best one, but that is not expected, but is a really good help. Fundamentally, if you have no experience working with young people or in education, you need to get that sorted out now. It will have a big negative effect on your application. So unless you're applying in a really strong subject, so a really, really shortage subject, that will really count against you. So really do think about getting some experience. So try and get as high up that pyramid as you can and prepare for this question. So prepare what you're going to say and actually get that experience and move as high up the pyramid as you can. So let's move on to 2 bonus things that you could talk about and you could be asked. So the first one is dealing with safeguarding questions. So they could ask some questions in your interview to do with safeguarding. And there is a simple procedure that you can follow to answer really any safeguarding question. So firstly, anything to do with safeguarding you take very seriously. It becomes your number 1 priority. Any question about safeguarding where you've got to rank what would you do, you always put safeguarding above everything else. The safety and welfare of pupils comes before anything else. For example, if you're not going to get all your marking done because of a safeguarding issue, that's fine. Do the safeguarding thing. You can also talk about knowing the policy. So you have to know what the policies are at the school. And there's a person called the DSL, that's the designated safeguarding lead. Say in your interview that you will know who that person is and any concerns will be immediately reported to them. That all safeguarding is treated confidentially, that you don't discuss safeguarding issues with other teachers other than those that are designated to deal with it, and that you don't ever talk about safeguarding issues with students or with people outside of the school ever. You can also never promise to a student that a safeguarding issue will be kept secret. If a student tells you something and says, don't tell anybody, you can't do that. You have to pass it on to the safeguarding team. If a student says that they don't want you to tell anybody, you never promise that. Safeguarding is everyone's responsibility, and you can talk about that in your interview. If you are visiting a school and you see a safeguarding issue, it is your responsibility to take the correct course of action. You don't investigate it and resolve it. You have to pass that on to the appropriate people. As a PGCE student, you are part of the extended safeguarding team. You're not paid to be an assistant principal involved in safeguarding, but you are a member of the school staff and you are an adult in a school. You are responsible for safeguarding. Make sure you're clear about that. And the other tip is, if in doubt, report it. If you see something that's very minor and you think, is that an issue? Don't go down the road of thinking, is it, isn't it? Just record it, just report it. It may be small, but perhaps for that particular vulnerable person, that 23 little small things have been spotted this week. And actually, when you see a list of 23 small concerns in 1 week, actually there is a big problem there that has now been revealed. So when you get a safeguarding question, think about these things and talk about those, and you will be successful. Finally, as a bonus, I've prepared some questions that you can ask at the end of your interview. So take some time to look through these questions at the end of this video and pick the ones that you like and write them down and use those in your interview. So I hope this video has been really helpful to you. If this video has helped you out, please subscribe and like this video so other people can see it, and I will make more content on this topic. And finally, best of luck in your PGCE interview, and thank you very much for watching.